The Working Families Party throws its support behind Elizabeth Warren, and GM workers go on strike. So many things today, Sagar.
Oh, absolutely. Team Rising is here. Colin O'Hara is a Democratic strategist, and Marissa Martinez is a Republican strategist. She previously served as political director for Governor Charlie Baker's re-election campaign. Welcome back to you both.
Great to see you guys.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I mean, this is very, very big news. The Working Families Party's decision in order to endorse Elizabeth Warren. We have their endorsement that we can show you guys on the screen. But I think what was the major news here, Colin, was that they endorsed Bernie Sanders in 2016.
Yeah.
And why do you think they decided to go with Warren this time?
Well, look, there's an old adage in advertising that new always beats better.
Okay.
And, you know, both Warren and Bernie are very, very close on issues. And she had the momentum behind her. And, you know, in terms of the vote, the people have spoken in the Working Families Party. They voted, the party leaders voted, and she got the endorsement.
Yeah.
Well, and to that point, after they announced the endorsement, we learned a little bit more about the process by which those votes are tallied. 50% of the vote goes to their 10,000 plus voting members, and 50% goes to about 50 plus leaders of the organization, and they refuse to release the separate vote tallies, putting out a bizarre statement saying that 80% of our members picked either Sanders or Warren as their top choices. So seems like reading between the tea leaves here, the members wanted one thing, the leadership wanted something else.
Yes, and I think for endorsement rollout processes, that's always an interesting. It's always an interesting discussion to see what leadership wants versus what members want. Sometimes those things kind of collide, but in other times, like you said, it makes for kind of an interesting discussion to see who's going to be the new it thing.
Well, I mean, it shows here that the leaders are acting like the leaders of a lot of these establishment places. They are saying, okay,
they're like
this populism, they're like, this populism
Really?
thing is coming for us. Let's make it so that we work within the system. Elizabeth Warren has this momentum. She has all this money going behind her. Let's see if we can glob onto her campaign and at least get some of what we want when she ascends to the White House. Is that how you see it, Colin?
Yeah, and look, I think the party leadership sees the tea leaves, and that is she is the one that has momentum behind her. She's the one that's growing. In all new polls, she is surging. She's continued to surge, and it's been a long, slow, steady climb. So I think they just read the tea leaves and said, hey, we think that this is where the eventual nomination is going to be, and we want to be with her early on.
That's a big bet in order to make, don't you think?
Always.
Marissa? Because I mean, this is something. Or Joe Biden doesn't look like he's particularly going anywhere, at least for right now. But C, I mean, the thing is if these, this Working Families Party is having allied themselves with workers and with Bernie, I mean, his support amongst their base has got to be just absolutely rock solid. And so going against what your members want, or at least some of what your members want, it could really backfire.
Yeah, it can absolutely backfire because, it is still very early out. But these endorsements, do have to start rolling out and start essentially picking individuals that they think are going to, either catch up or one up Biden.
I mean, Colin, Sagar is pointing to one of the stranger dynamics here, which is actual working families support Bernie Sanders more than they support Elizabeth Warren. Something we talk about a lot on this show is how different their coalitions are. If you look at Sanders, he finds his strongest support among people making less than $50,000. The lower you go on the income scale, the more support he has. Warren's the exact opposite. The higher you go on the income scale, the higher you go on the education scale, the more Warren support that you find. So it feels a little strange, frankly, to have the Working Families Party endorsing the candidate that doesn't have the strongest support among working people.
I think if you go by polling, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I think if you look at issues, they're nearly in the same place. One has a probably more well-known series of plans, and one simply has the momentum.
So you see it as just a political calculation,
absolutely.
not a differentiation on issues or who'd be better for working people.
No, not at all. Let's take a look at where their risk is. I mean, they're primarily Working Families is a New York-based organization. They're not in risk of losing the nomination for one candidate or another. I think it puts Warren in an interesting position to be able to win it, actually.
Well, and to your point, both about New York but also about political calculation, this isn't the first time that Working Families Party has made a sort of political calculation. They endorsed Joe Crowley over AOC. They endorsed Cuomo over Zephyr Teachout. So, they're not above looking to see which way the political winds are blowing. Of course, they were totally wrong on Crowley.
Yes.
No, that's a good point. I mean, at the same time that all of this is going on, we have this United Auto Workers strike, which is, I mean, if since we're talking about workers, this is the biggest strike, I think, in over a decade that we've seen
since the last time
union.
that they struck.
Since the last time that they struck. And this just goes to their frustration. They say that they don't have bigger job security. Now, Marissa, this is one thing that the president was actually very forceful on, but he hasn't really been trying to force either side. Do you expect to see a little bit more of that?
I actually don't. And I think it's because, as you pointed out, the last time they went on strike was, I think, 2010.
Yeah.
Right now, we're seeing, 50,000 workers going on strike. So I think the longer the strike ends up going, obviously, the more damage, and then, the more of a political issue it's going to become. But right now, we're still kind of in the beginning phases to see, what else do the union workers want.
And one of the big issues, according to the workers, is this two-tier system where people have been at the plant for a while are treated a certain way, new workers are treated a different way, which is a common tactic to sort of break up the solidarity within a union. Very critical principle there. But on the politics, Colin, how important is this? If you're looking at Michigan, if you're looking at Wisconsin, if you're looking at Ohio, where the Lordstown plant is, this is not a good look for this president who pledged to be the friend of the working class man and woman.
No, he didn't. And I bet if you took a poll of some of these UAW workers, there would be a lot that actually voted for Trump.
Absolutely.
Oh,
100%.
Yeah, and so he is in an interesting position because the longer the strike goes on, the more potential it has to damage the economy, which is if he's smart, full kind of campaign issue to run behind. And also if he doesn't represent the workers, he may look disingenuous to them, and then he'll start to fracture support amongst the white working class that has been a pretty good base for him.
That's what he really needs to do.
And you could argue that President Obama's support for American automakers is essentially what won him re-election. I mean, this is just such an iconic American industry that punches above its weight in terms of the American political conversation.
Yeah, I mean, kind of to your point as well, it's unfortunate that we're kind of still seeing this discussion go on, but I think, as I pointed out earlier, it's still, early on in the strike. Obviously, Michigan, their economy will take a huge hit the longer the strike kind of goes on.
Yeah, no, you're right, Marissa. And that's the main thing, is if he wants to hold on to these three states, I mean, he criticized GM heavily for closing those plants in Lordstown and for a lot of these jobs, which ended up would not remain here in the United States. He needs to be hammering this every day. I think he really has strayed a little bit in terms of the conversation that he has on these issues. I mean, Foxconn and all, like the Carrier plant. I mean, that is why people voted for Trump.
Right. Correct.
Not, I don't know what he's really talking about these days, but this whole socialism sucks and all this other stuff, that's not the core of his campaign. It's about saving American workers. And if he strays away from that, he's going to have a big problem. But you guys sit tight. We're going to have more Rising right after a quick break.